We now come to the statement. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning in Downing Street, I met some of the mothers and adult adoptees harmed by historic adoption practices in England. They are here with us in the gallery today. And I had the chance to talk with them privately. They are the most remarkable women, and I know the whole House will want to join me in paying tribute to the extraordinary courage with which they've shared their harrowing testimonies and fought for the truth time and time again. I have to confess, as I said to them this morning, I found it hard to read the testimonies and to hear their stories. I found it particularly hard as a dad. How much harder it must have been for them to go through that, to set out their testimonies and tell their stories over and over again. As they said to me this morning, something which is so intensely private, having to be public, and the courage and resilience they have shown, and others alongside them, is absolutely incredible, and I want to mark that. Mr. Speaker, what happened to them and to tens of thousands of mothers, children and families should never have happened. It is a stain on our history. Mothers, many young, vulnerable and without support, were coerced, bullied or misled into feeling that they had no choice but to have their children taken away from them. What a thing to do. And Mr. Speaker, these were not isolated or accidental acts. They were practices embedded within systems across local authorities, across voluntary and faith-based institutions, and in health and social care services, including parts of what is now the NHS. All institutions that operated with power over people's lives. Yet they did so without compassion, without consent, and without dignity or proper safeguards. Mr. Speaker, these practices were particularly prevalent between 1949 and 1976, but also extended beyond those years. In some cases, women, including those placed in mother and baby homes and other institutional settings, were cut off from their families, relationships, education and employment, and subjected to harsh and isolated conditions. Some experienced treatment that amounted to exploitation and abuse. Mr. Speaker, many were made to feel ashamed, and that came through very, very powerfully in the discussions I had this morning. Silenced and unworthy of care or dignity. Children grew up believing that they were unwanted. Young mothers were told that they were immoral and that their babies would be better off without them. And again, as they told me this morning, that lasts a lifetime and has a huge impact. Anne Lloyd Keane, here in the gallery, and of course formerly of this House, described to the Education Committee how she was stitched without anaesthetic and said, and I quote, that she was told, "You will remember the pain because you've been a bad girl." Mr. Speaker, many of those harmed in this way feel a gut-wrenching sense of shame, and Anne and others have said that stayed with her and that she still feels it today. And I know that this apology will not be able to lift that completely. It will help a little, I hope, but it won't lift it completely. And today I say to Anne, to everyone here in the gallery with us, to all those impacted and affected, wherever they are in the country, and there are many, many thousands of them, including some who still have not been able to speak about what happened to them to this day. And I hope that this statement, this apology, perhaps gives some of them the confidence to speak about what happened to them, because it will help in a small way. But I say this, the shame is not yours. The shame was never yours. The shame is ours. And I say that on behalf of the whole country, I say it to every single person impacted. We are deeply and profoundly sorry. To the mothers who were told they were unfit, who were prevented from caring for the children they desperately wanted to help and to keep, and who've carried this loss for decades. To those who were not given the information they needed to provide informed consent, who faced pressure or coercion, and to experience practices that were unethical. To the sons and daughters, the children who are now adults, who through pressure and coercion within these systems were taken from their families, denied their identity, their history, and sometimes their safety. To those who grew up believing that they were unwanted, some of whom were even told directly that they were second class. To those who've carried a burden of loss, confusion and stigma, or who experienced neglect and abuse without the protection or oversight that should have been their right. To those who've experienced lifelong uncertainty, loss, or questions about identity and belonging, or whose mental and physical health, relationships, and sense of self across their lives has been affected. To the fathers who are denied a voice, excluded from decisions, or separated from their children. To the siblings, grandparents, partners, and extended family, and future generations who've lived with the consequences of these practices. To those who experienced harm from these practices, even while being brought up in loving homes by their adoptive parents. To those who were adopted across borders or cultures, who lost connections to their heritage, racial and personal identity. And to those from ethnic minority backgrounds who experienced racism or were treated differently within these systems, and who, as a group, were less likely to be adopted or to grow up in stable family homes. Mr. Speaker, I'm struck by the words of Debbie Irumli, who I met this morning. She says she was raised with racist views towards her own biological family. Mr. Speaker, how do you even begin to comprehend that? To each and every one of those affected, we say a deep and heartfelt sorry. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear and unequivocal. These harms were compounded by the actions and failures of the state. Governments funded, enabled and relied on systems that were not consistently or effectively overseen. The state did not prevent harm from continuing. The state bears responsibility for the systems it funded and legitimised, which enabled these practices to occur. The state did not do enough to protect mothers, children and families from harm. And for this systemic failure, I am truly sorry. Mr. Speaker, many of those affected have suffered a further injustice. They've had to fight for the basic human right to know their own story. As Sally Ells has put it, we are treated as if the information about our own lives does not belong to us. Debbie was told her birth mother's life would be in danger if she tried to search for her. Barriers put in place at every twist and turn. Records have in some cases been lost, altered, or not made fully accessible to those seeking answers. And the whole process is painfully slow, traumatic, and dehumanising all over again. Mr. Speaker, we do say sorry, and we mean it. But sorry is not enough. This must also be the start of real change, working with those affected and their families to improve access to records and to provide the care and support that people need. So today I can tell the House we will fund the development of a national online resource, creating a single access point to locate records wherever they may be held across the country. We will consult on requiring existing records to be retained for 100 years so they will remain available across the lifetime of those affected. And my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, is today writing to local authorities, regional adoption agencies and voluntary adoption agencies setting out the expectation that requests for records should be responded to swiftly and with compassion and consistency. And we will expand access to funded intermediary services, with particular focus on pre-1976 cases where access to support is currently most limited. We will establish national virtual peer-led support groups for mothers and adopted adults to improve access to ongoing trauma-informed support across the country. And we will work with NHS England to ensure those affected are taken seriously when they seek help. This includes new support for clinicians to better understand the impact of forced adoption and respond appropriately in their care. The NHS England will also explore how those who wish to do so can have their experience of forced adoption appropriately recorded in their health record. And finally, to further recognise those affected and ensure we learn the lessons of the past, we will commission a testimonials project to capture the stories of those with experience of historic forced adoption practices. Through all of this and more, we will continue to meet regularly with those with lived experience, guided by them to get this support right, to learn from our past and ensure that nothing like this can ever happen in this country again. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this national apology reflects and builds on the approaches taken by Scotland and Wales, whose devolved governments have also issued apologies for these practices, which we fully endorse. And I welcome the process underway in Northern Ireland to establish a statutory public inquiry into mother and baby institutions, Magdalene laundries and workhouses. And I also want to thank the Joint Committee on Human Rights and the Education Select Committee for all they've done to shine a light on this injustice. But most of all, I want to thank those who have campaigned for so long to have the truth recognised, including those who are no longer with us, to hear this apology that they fought for. It should never have happened, and you should not have had to fight so hard for this day to come. But today, finally, I do say on behalf of the state and on behalf of the nation as a whole, we see you, we hear you, and we are truly sorry. I commend this statement to the House, Mr. Speaker.
Shadow Secretary of State Alex Burkhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for advance side of his statement and also for coming to the House to deliver this statement himself. On behalf of His Majesty's opposition, we welcome very much what he has said and agree that whenever the state makes grave errors, it has a deep responsibility to apologise for what it did to those that it has wronged. 185,000 children grew up in Britain without their mothers because of bad decisions and fundamentally flawed beliefs that treated unmarried mothers with a shame and stigma that today is mercifully alien to us. But those decisions and those beliefs have left a permanent mark on each and every one of those lives, on children separated from their mothers and on the mothers whose children were taken away. As the Prime Minister said, this is a stain on our history. Bonds between mothers and children are the foundation of security and identity, indeed perhaps the foundation of all we have. And whilst I know from very much experience that the act of adopting a child is amongst the greatest kindness one person can show another, and that many of those children will have gone on to be raised by loving families, there can be no doubt that they will also have carried a great grief across many years. One cannot help to be moved by the very powerful testimonies that some have given. I remember just one. The journey back from the hospital was the longest I held my daughter. It was 2 hours, and it was like everything suddenly made sense. I just felt like this was absolutely right, and I wouldn't let go of her. A woman appeared and said, "It's time," and she was taken from my arms and handed over. And the baby howled, I assume I did, and the following week they sent me back to school. Thousands upon thousands of such experiences happening every day in every corner of our country over many years. Thankfully, in the years since, a huge amount has been done to ensure that such things cannot happen again in our country. change in adoption law and modern courts and legislation make a repeat of these injustices very much less likely. So we welcome the steps that the Prime Minister has outlined today, and very much welcome the fact that the Education Secretary is writing to local authorities and agencies setting the expectation that requests for records should be swiftly responded to. I'm glad that that builds on the steps the last government tried to take to improve access to adoption records, offer post-adoption counselling and improve the complaints procedure for agencies. All of these steps we hope will make a difference to some of those experiences, some of those whose experiences lie in the past and many in the future. While the state, I would like to ask the Prime Minister, if I may, just a small number of questions. The Education Select Committee called for an assessment of international redress schemes. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether the government is considering this? I very much welcome the Prime Minister's announcement of support groups for mothers and adopted adults. Could he tell us who will be responsible for establishing this service and what budget will be set aside for it? But I thank the Prime Minister very much for his statement and repeat what he has said to those affected. The shame was never yours.
Well, could I thank him for the tone of his response and for the welcome for what the government set out today, and thank him for the care and attention that he has shown to this issues and linked issues personally. And can I say to him and the whole House that I genuinely believe it is so important that we speak with one voice in this House today, so that those affected know this is an apology from all of us in equal measure, and that it is a united House on an issue like this. And thank him for leading in that way, because it impacts not us in this chamber, it impacts all those who have been affected by this, to know that this whole House supports the apology that's given today, and the way it's being given is really important to them, and I do thank him for that. In relation to his questions, we are looking at schemes. We are being guided by those affected as the support that they think is most important to them, and will continue to be guided in that way. And as for responsibility, he asked, that will be the Department for Education, but I'm very happy to provide him with further information as these things develop. Thank you.
Chair of the Select Committee, Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The evidence the Education Select Committee heard from mothers and adult adoptees was utterly devastating. I want to thank Diana de Vries, Anne Lloyd-Keane, Sally Ells and Debbie Iromlu for courageously reliving their trauma so that we could shine a light on the extent of the injustice they suffered and the urgency of the need for a meaningful response. They should not have had to work so hard for so long just to be heard and to have their experiences recognised. I also want to thank the academics who gave evidence, and especially Professor Harold Gordon and Dr. Michael Lambert, whose painstaking and rigorous research helped to prove what mothers and adult adoptees have long known, that the state was culpable for the wrongs they suffered by presiding over, funding and facilitating a system that systematically dehumanised unmarried pregnant women and their babies and inflicted horrific cruelty upon them. I thank the Prime Minister for this apology today. It is long overdue and much needed. I thank him for the breadth of the apology and for the work the government has done with survivors to get to this point. Women whose babies were forcibly adopted and who endured cruelty and humiliation in mother and baby homes and in the NHS should know today that the shame of this period in our history rests on the government and on religious and community and healthcare organisations who presided over, facilitated and sustained this system. It is not theirs to carry, and it never was theirs to carry. This apology, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a watershed, but it must be only the beginning of putting right the disgraceful wrongs of this shameful period of our history. So can I ask the Prime Minister to set out how progress on delivering the support that he has announced today will be monitored, and how survivors will continue to be involved in it? And can I ask him to make sure, as the government progresses this work, that information on how to access this support is made widely available? Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, so many families have a story. There are so many stories that are still untold, so many who still feel ashamed to speak about this period in their lives and the lifelong impact of it. And they must no longer feel ashamed. They must feel that they can come forward and access the help and support that they need.
Well, can I thank her for all the work that she has done on this, and that she has led through the Education Committee and all the members of that committee. I've heard about the testimony to the committee and how difficult and harrowing it was for all concerned, and she's absolutely right to thank those who gave their testimony to the committee and those who supported the work of the committee. She used the word dehumanised, and that is the right word, although it hardly feels strong enough to me. To break the bond between a mother and a child is nothing less than dehumanising. It goes to an intense feeling that we all have as human beings, and to break that bond is indescribably painful, even to describe, let alone to have gone through. So dehumanising is the right word, and not just the initial act and all the pain and anguish, but then, as I discussed with those in the gallery this morning, the everyday reminders. Do you have children? What a difficult and awful question to answer over and over again. They've all come to terms with how they'll answer that question. A question we all here, we all pose on a daily or weekly basis. Just really struck me this morning as such a simple everyday thing, but such a painful thing. And there'll be so many, thousands of those across all of the testimonies and all of the stories. In relation to her questions, the monitoring will be by the Department of Education. We will, of course, involve survivors as we go forward, and I've no doubt the committee will want to monitor that itself and to be updated regularly. And the point she makes about making the support widely known is so important, because there are many thousands who need the support, and they need to know it's available. And I'm acutely conscious, as I said during the statement, there are some who've still not been able to speak about this to this day. And I'd hope that by making it widely available and widely known, the support, that may help some of them to feel that they can come forward and get the support they need. Thank you.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement? And on behalf of the Liberal Democrats, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister's apology, and we associate ourselves fully with all of his remarks, including those about being united as one house in this apology. And can I pay tribute to all the mothers and children who have campaigned for so long, so bravely for this apology. Speaking as a mother, I cannot begin to imagine the trauma, the agony, and the shame they experienced and have had to live with. The testimony they gave to the Education Select Committee this year is some of the most powerful and harrowing ever heard in this Parliament. The mothers who gave birth denied pain relief as punishment, then given just a few hours or days with their newborn babies before they were stolen away, and the children only finding out years or decades later what had happened to them, discovering that they were victims of this appalling scandal. And this evil has been compounded by the long wait for an apology. It should have come long before now. It is a tragedy that Veronica Smith, whose daughter was taken from her 60 years ago and who founded the movement for an adoption apology 16 years ago, sadly passed away before she could see her campaign succeed. This apology is a tribute to her and all who have fought alongside her. And I hope it gives them some sense of closure. I hope it helps them know that the blame does not lie with them. It never did, but with those who did this to them and those who allowed it to happen. And that includes the Church of England, the Catholic Church, charities, and of course the state. But as the Select Committee heard, an apology in words alone isn't enough. It has to mean action to help heal the trauma this scandal has caused. So I very much welcome the steps the Prime Minister has announced today on adoption records, on trauma-informed support and the testimonials project. Could he tell us, will that support include a specialist mental health pathway for all those who need it? And will he commit to a continuing dialogue, as the Chair of the Education Select Committee has requested, a continuing dialogue with the survivors on any further support and or redress they want to see? Because today's apology is not the end. It must be the beginning of a better, more caring approach to these mothers and their children. Thank you.
Can I thank her for welcoming this apology and repeat just how important that is, that we are united across this House speaking with one voice. I do thank her for that. And she mentioned the long wait for an apology, a long wait for justice, and that's the double injustice. Not just what happened, but then the fight, as is often the case, for acknowledgement of what went wrong. And we've got this wrong as a state so often. We circle the wagons and protect the decision makers and the wrongdoers instead of asking ourselves the question, where's the injustice here and how do we put it right? That has to change. Because it's happened in this case and it's happened in other cases. So I thank her for drawing attention to that. We are looking at mental health pathways. I think they're vitally important, and how they need to be tailored as well, trauma-informed and developed. And yes, of course, we'll continue the dialogue with all of those affected and with the Education Committee and with the House. Thank you.
Tracy Gilbert.
Deputy Speaker, as an adopted person born in 1972, I welcome today's statement from the Prime Minister. I have no idea if my birth mother felt forced to have me adopted, but I do know that prior to the birth, she was in a Church of Scotland mother and baby home. My adopted parents have since died, but I am sure they would not want to have adopted any child who had been forcibly removed from their mother. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that mothers should be supported by the state to look after their children and not forced to give them up?
Can I thank her for sharing her personal experience? And it is obvious how hard that is. Things that are intensely personal and private, full of pain and grief, being said out loud in a chamber like this is really difficult. It's hard for some of us to comprehend just how difficult that must be. And so I salute her courage and resilience and all those that have spoken out. To have to speak out about something which is so intensely difficult, so over and over again, is incredibly, incredibly demanding. But the comfort, I hope, is not only that because of that, you've been seen and heard, but that others will have the courage to speak out about what happened to them. And I thank her in that regard as well. And yes, we must keep up this support. Yes, we must keep up the dialogue, and we will. And I thank her again.
Sir Edward Lee.
I agree with everything that the Prime Minister has said, and I join in his apology. And of course, whilst historical misdeeds, and these are misdeeds, have got to be condemned, individuals have to be judged by the standards and morality of their own time, not our own, and we've got to bear that in mind. But I will say this, that those of us who claim to be of religious persuasion should remember that our religion should be one not of judgment, but of love. And that love should extend to everybody, young mothers, babies, and every frail person from the very beginning of life to the very end.
Can I thank him for his contribution of his welcoming of the report and his comments about love. I don't entirely agree with him, I have to confess, on judging people by the standards of the day. I understand the point he makes, but I think something as visceral as this, actually on any standards, was wrong then and now. I'm not disrespecting the point he makes. I just personally feel quite strongly that to dehumanise someone in this way is hard, really, to explain whenever the standards were in place. But otherwise, I agree with everything he said.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Prime Minister for his really heartfelt statement. I think everybody here could feel that. But does he agree with me that we must recognise the lack of empathy, the dehumanising approach that was adopted in this practice? I'm minded of the statement, don't judge someone before you walk in their shoes, should apply. And unfortunately, still in some service areas, we don't apply this, and that is demonising and dehumanising of people. We do need to recognise and support our common humanity.
Well, can I thank her for her question and what she's done on this and so many other issues. And she's absolutely right that this cannot simply be a backward-looking exercise. It has to be something where we carry the principles that sit behind this apology into all the other instances where there is disrespect, a lack of regard for people's dignity, and that will make the apology more meaningful, I'm sure, if we commit to that.
Sir Julian Smith.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for the incredibly powerful statement. I was lucky enough to bring forward legislation in Northern Ireland for victims of institutional child abuse, and as part of that legislation there was an apology. Those people, like the victims in this case, waited decades for people in important positions to properly listen to them. And I think what he's done today is a massive step forward. But even when the apology took place in Northern Ireland, the churches could not bring themselves to move away from the script provided by their lawyers. And I would just urge every institution that has been involved in these horrendous crimes to properly say sorry. We've heard about the processes that will follow this statement, but could I urge the Prime Minister to use the considerable power he will have as a former Prime Minister to stay involved in this issue?
Well, can I firstly assure him I will stay involved in this issue? It's a deep injustice. Secondly, can I thank him for the work that he did in Northern Ireland, because it was a really important moment. He's absolutely right about the way others, the churches, the example he gave, because if you say you see someone and you hear someone, you have to see them and you have to hear them. You can't give an apology that is just lawyer's script. You have to listen, you have to take it in, you have to try and understand. You can't completely, because you've not been through what they've been through. And I would like, in that regard, if I may, just to thank the Secretary of State and her team for the way that they have gone about preparing this, because I know that they've tried their level best to make sure that they have reflected, seeing and hearing those who have been affected by that. And it does make a difference, because an apology can be a formal form of words, or it can be something which is heartfelt and meaningful. And I hope, beyond hope, that today is received as something heartfelt and meaningful. And I extend thanks to the team in government who've done so much work to try and ensure that that is the way today is received.
Serena Brackenridge.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I must start by thanking the victims and sufferers who came to the Education Select Committee and shared their harrowing first-hand lived experiences. It was extremely difficult to hear, but my gosh, it must have been unimaginable to actually live those experiences. But the victims, again and again, were put through processes where they had to relive their trauma, an unacceptable struggle for the justice that they deserve. I thank the Prime Minister for his unreserved, heartfelt apology. But does he agree that this must be the beginning, with survivor-led support, specialised counselling, improved access to records and help to reunite families living with this injustice.
Her for all her work in this area, for her powerful intervention and question, and she's absolutely right about not just the initial injustice, but all the hoops, burdens and barriers that were then put into place. Almost every twist and turn, every road were fresh barriers put in place. And that is why this absolutely must be the beginning of survivor-led support, and we mark it in that way.
Manuela Pertigala.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We heard on the Education Select Committee harrowing testimonies of the cruelty that unmarried mothers and their babies were subjected to. They were shamed, coerced and separated from their babies, causing lifelong trauma for all of them. And the government's apology is welcome, yet long overdue, because for many survivors, official recognition of this injustice is an essential step towards healing. And ensuring that survivors obtain information about their personal histories is fundamental. So can the Prime Minister set out a time scale for the national online resource to improve access to adoption records?
Well, can I thank her for her work on the committee and agree with her that the apology is long overdue. It should have been given a long time ago, in my view. The point she makes about information is so important, and the online resource will be put in place as quickly as possible. It's not a small matter, because this is information that belongs to those that are affected. It's not information that's provided to them out of some service from the state. It's their information, and the fact that barriers have been put in the way of those seeking their own information about their own lives, their own identity, is an appalling additional injustice, of which there are very many in these cases.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I sincerely thank the Prime Minister for his statement today as the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Adoption, and he will know that I wrote to him at the start of the year about the importance of issuing this apology, and I really thank him for the way that he has done that. We know that 185,000, that's just hard to appreciate, 185,000 families were affected from that post-war era to 1976 with forced adoption, 404 families in my own city. Will he ensure rapid access to therapeutic support? Because we know it's incredibly difficult both for adoptees but also for women and those who were girls who had their babies forcibly removed, but also consider babies who were brought to the UK from other jurisdictions who also were forcibly removed from their mothers.
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for her work on the APPG and for her campaigning on this and acknowledge what she has done. As for the number, whether it's 185,000 or not, which is a shocking number, I worry it may be more than that, because I worry there are cases that we still don't know about, where the records aren't available, and where, as I say, some people have felt that they still can't talk about it. So that rapid access to therapeutic support is hugely important. She's right to highlight it.
Alicia Kearns.
Madam Deputy Speaker, to all the mothers and your stolen children who have wrongly carried grief and shame for so long, you were denied the love that you deserved and tortured by a state, and the silence only re-victimised you, and we are sorry. But it is shameful that Bernardos and the Salvation Army have yet to apologise and face up to the role that they played in this. My father was haunted by the way in which Bernardos played a role, and he would tell me of his horror of seeing the laundries as he walked around the streets of Dublin that he carried for life. But in addition to those who were cruelly and forcibly adopted, hundreds of babies died or frankly were killed as their mothers were tortured, and they were buried in unmarked graves. So will the Prime Minister, as he continues with his important work on this, put in place an effort to find those graves and to force the opening up of those records so that the mothers who were denied a lifetime of memories of their children can at least now bury them and have time at those graves with them?
I can give that undertaking. Can I thank her for raising that important aspect? And with each question, with each issue, we can begin to understand the very many ways in which the injustice across a number of different fields, a number of different strands played its part. But for those who lost their babies altogether, that work on graves is really important and on records. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I echo the Prime Minister's powerful tribute to the women, to the mothers and families who suffered and struggled for so long for this apology, and who suffer still the legacy of such state failure and indeed state cruelty, which shames us but never them. The moral outrage targeted against unmarried mothers is largely past, but the Prime Minister spoke about the lack of compassion which enabled the state cruelty. And we do see today increasingly in bureaucratic processes, increasingly in technology, in under-resourced state capability, still too often, a lack of compassion and understanding. What can the Prime Minister say to reassure us that action can be taken to ensure humanity and compassion in the state?
Well, can I thank her for her question and the way in which she drew attention to the suffering. And we absolutely have to make sure that compassion is there in everything the state does. And we can change rules, we can change processes, but it's a culture. It's about recognising that human dignity matters whoever you are, wherever you are. And if that was inserted into everything the government does and the state does, what a difference it will make. Human dignity is one of the most important things to me in my politics, and that's what's been lacking here, and we'll do everything we can to turn that around.
Tom Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for this long overdue apology and his statement today. Nothing can undo the horrific harm and trauma that has been caused. A number of steps that is outlined in this statement talk about developing a national online resource and a national virtual peer-led support groups. I wonder if I might press the Prime Minister on what steps will be taken to ensure those who might struggle to access digital services and might be digitally excluded, what support they can expect, and if he might consider setting up a national hotline so everyone can get justice, no matter if they can use technology or not.
We are setting up a national advice line because it is important that it is national, that it is available, and that it comes in different forms, because digital will work for most people but not necessarily everyone, and this is where we need to make sure that everybody affected and everybody who hasn't come forward yet finds a way to get that support in the appropriate way, and we'll take those steps.
Florence Eshelome.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I also want to thank the Prime Minister for this important statement and to pay a tribute to the courage of the women who came forward, including my constituent Anne Keane. Shortly after I was elected in 2019, I met Anne. We first met online. And what I sensed from Anne was someone who was not going to give up until her voice and the voices of many women who suffered this injustice that wrong had been right. And Anne has worked tirelessly with many other campaigners. And in that spirit of cross-party, I want to pay tribute to the late Sir David Amess, who also led on this, and the letter that he delivered to the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson in May 2021. I still remember that. I still have that text message on my phone from Anne telling me what more I could do. I also served on the Joint Committee on Human Rights when we launched our report in July 2022 under the chairmanship of the Noble Baroness Harman. And it is right that this apology has come, but as everyone has mentioned, this apology is not enough. I want to ask the Prime Minister what more can be done to ensure that the voices of women are taken seriously. We had the maternity statement the other day, and a running theme in all of these injustices is women not being believed, women being silenced, and women being told that they are the problem. What more can we do to ensure that women's voices are front and centre when it comes to matters concerning them?
Can I thank her for drawing attention to the anguish that the mothers must have felt, and that constant sense of shame that was inflicted, but also to the adult adoptees, as they described them this morning. this message of being unwanted is really hard. And as they said to me this morning, it's not something you can just offload. It's not something that changes. And again, as we discussed this morning, even where parents and children have been reunited, that's not been easy. It isn't walking off into the sunset as we'd all like to believe. It is extremely difficult next chapter of a journey. And so I thank her for raising that and for reminding us of the work of Sir David Amis on this. And she's absolutely right. The voices of women have not been heard in the way that they should. And this is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern of behaviour. And we have to do better than this as we go forward.
Sarah Perchin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My own mother was pressurised into giving up a baby for adoption, and this was handled by the church. I only found out after her death. She carried her secret to her grave. When I found out, I tried to find my sibling, but drew a blank. I had to pay privately to find him, and we've now been united. Can the Prime Minister assure those affected that the new systems and resources will be given the funding they need to reunite families?
Can I thank her for sharing that personal story? And we can all see just how difficult that must have been. She's shown huge courage in saying that in the chamber today. The way she described her mother taking the script to her grave is very powerful, and an example of the way in which some people simply feel they can't talk about this and didn't talk about this, and where they've passed will never now be able to talk about this. So she shows great courage in speaking on her mother's behalf as well. I'm glad that there has been that reuniting, but it can't be the painful journey that she's just described. We have to do better than that, and we will.
Janet Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Prime Minister for his sincere and moving apology, and I stand with him on that, as I'm sure everyone does across this chamber. And may I say there is possibly no dry eye across this chamber, which really demonstrates the effect it's had on all of us as a society. Now, the Prime Minister will know that previously, as the Children and Families Minister, I've met with campaigners and with victims of this abhorrent abuse of historic forced adoption. And it feels for me, and I hope it feels for them and everyone across this chamber, that the tide is beginning to turn. And indeed, I am delighted and indeed overjoyed about this apology, but we've already heard that it's taken a long time coming. And I think that continues to need to be recognised. But I hope out of this situation that there's more caring and there's more compassion that begins to come through our society, because we do lack that and we need that more and more as days go on. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has mentioned about therapy and new support for clinicians. And obviously that therapy and that support will need to be there for adoptive families, for extended families, and of course the adopted adults themselves. But I wonder if the Prime Minister can say a little bit more about what that new support for clinicians will be. And if he cannot say that now, if he will agree for written statements to come back to the Chamber or to the House Library on that. But I'd also just like to press him to say that specialist therapy is needed for adopted children, and in particular DDP. And I press him again to look at this, please.
Well, can I thank her for her question and for the work she did as Children and Families Minister. I know she did a lot on this, and I thank her for it and pay tribute to it. She's right about the support that needs to go in, particularly the specialist therapy that is needed. I'm in no doubt about that. It is important that we're putting further funding into, for example, the Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund, raising that to £55 million. But we need to keep talking to those affected, to keep talking across this House to make sure we get this right.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Prime Minister has done a good deed today, and he is deservedly getting the united response from the House that he requested. I would like to ask him, because of the admirable idea of putting the documentation online, whether there will be a facility on that website for people to perhaps upload their own stories if they wish to do so. One aspect that is being somewhat skirted around is, why did all this happen in the first place? And the answer appears to be that there was too much state respect for dogmatic and fundamentalist interpretations of religious doctrine. So can we look at our society today and say that there aren't, in some parts of that society, still too much religious repression of women and too much respect for cultural sensitivities that is preventing us from tackling that?
Yes, we can say that, and we should say that, and I thank him for reminding us that this is not all about the past, and if we mean what we say, we have to tackle the present as well. And I was struck not just about the dogmatic adherence to what were thought to be views at the time, but the complete lack of empathy, the complete lack of feeling. That is something else. That goes beyond dogma. That's just how human beings treat each other, and the examples I've had described to me are about individual human beings dehumanising other individual human beings when they didn't have to. They chose to act in that way, adding even more grief and pain to what was an awful injustice in any event. As for the uploading of stories, there will be, I think, the facility for testimonials to be there. Obviously only if people want to share them, but we are looking at how that can be done.
Olivia Blake.
Speaker, and I have to thank the Prime Minister wholeheartedly for this apology. I think that everyone present today can see the pain and the real need for this. And I want to ask specifically, quite technically, about the national online resource. We know that families often end up paying huge amounts of money to try and locate other family members. Often DNA is a way that people are reunited. Is that something that has been considered in an online resource as being able to help people whose records may have been lost, heavily redacted, or withheld, to reunite with family members?
Well, I thank her for raising this, and we're working with all those affected and the families precisely on that issue to make sure that all the relevant information is put together. It's a difficult job because it's held in different places in different ways, and therefore I can't stand here and pretend all the information's available. We've simply got to get it into one place. It is going to take a lot of work to get it all there, and some of it may not be retrievable, but we'll do everything we can to make sure it's as complete as possible, as quickly as possible.
Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The apology today is so welcome, and my heart goes out to all those people who have campaigned and been hurt by the failings of the state. In his statement, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "These harms were compounded by the actions and failures of the state." And just this week, in this chamber, we've heard about that for women who are pregnant, when they're labouring, when they've just had a baby and they're very vulnerable. The adjournment debate on Monday night was about DES and justice for women who, over the decades, were prescribed a drug long after it was known it was harmful. And Baroness Amos's report this week says that this isn't just a historic problem with misogyny in the state, but today, women who are having children are ridiculed, not listened to, and are hurt as a result. So I ask the Prime Minister, how can we unwind misogyny from the state?
Well, can I thank her for raising this? We have to tackle misogyny in all its forms, wherever it rears its head, and it's here with us today, as she rightly says, even this week in the Chamber, in the various debates and issues that have been raised and are constantly raised. And therefore it is important that we address this by looking at it historically, up to today, and then forward and across the board. And I thank you for raising it.
Cat echoes.
Speaker, and can I add my thanks to the Prime Minister for this long overdue apology from the government for the historic forced adoptions in mother and baby homes across the country. It's something that I have campaigned for since coming to this place, and for far too long the horrific experiences of mothers and their children were ignored, and sadly many have passed away before this day has finally come. So I join everybody here in paying tribute to all the mothers, children and campaigners and the relatives that have supported them along the way, who fought tirelessly, and recognise your courage and determination. Today we take away their shame because it is not theirs to bear. Many have been left scarred by the trauma they endured, a lifetime of feeling unworthy, unloved, judged and guilty. And many babies lost their lives due to poor maternity care, and the location of their burials are not known. So could he consider a way to memorialise the lives lost, giving back some dignity? But does he also recognise that even modern adoption practices are inadequate, leaving adoptees and their families ill-equipped to deal with the trauma, attachment issues and identity struggles, and we must learn lessons from all these historical events?
Well, can I thank her for her campaigning on this issue? And in both respects, we have to find a way of providing memory to those that lost their lives. And to those mothers who passed away before today, this took too long. As a result of that, they're not hearing this apology. And we need to be really clear, that is an additional injustice. Thank you.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is long overdue, and so I congratulate the Prime Minister on bringing this forwards and for the tone in which he's delivered it. If I may, I'd like to raise a case of Jenny and Scott, two constituents who I've been supporting in recent months. They have for 6 years now been fostering a child called Alfie. They've provided a loving and nurturing home to Alfie, but they have persistently come up against blocks from the state as they seek to adopt him. Walsall Council in particular, they found it very difficult to gain support so that they can progress with adopting Alfie. And regretfully, they've had to now instruct the local authority to look towards a new fostering placement for him. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that whilst a pragmatic balance has to be struck between safeguarding and enabling a loving home to be found, the state must remove any bureaucratic obstructions along the way? And will the Prime Minister support me in trying to secure a meeting with the relevant minister so that Jenny and Scott can elaborate on this more comprehensively?
Can I thank him for raising the case of Jenny and Scott and Alfie? And can I assure him that if he provides the full details, I'll make sure not only that the relevant meeting takes place, but that we look at the details of that particular case.
Uma Kumaran.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for his moving statement and the formal apology today. We've heard from members across the House their heartfelt experiences, personal experiences, and the experiences of their constituents, and it's been deeply moving. I know all of our thoughts are with the mothers, babies and families separated, and everyone in England who has lived with this trauma. The shame was never theirs, and this apology recognises that. Madam Deputy Speaker, the member for Beckenham and Penge tabled a bill, Philomena's Law, that I was honoured to co-sponsor. It would ensure that victims of mother and baby homes in Ireland would not lose care support for accepting compensation that they're rightly owed. In the spirit of today, will the Prime Minister reiterate this government's commitment that survivors of Ireland's mother and baby homes will have their social care entitlements protected? And would he ensure that we continue to work closely with the Government of Ireland to ensure that British survivors abroad are also supported in this?
Can I thank her for raising this really important issue? And I'm aware of the issues, and I will remake that commitment that she asked for.
Dr Al Pinkerton.
Oh, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for his statement today and for the apology on behalf of the State. And can I also acknowledge the visitors that we have in the gallery today and the extraordinary testimonies of members across this House. So often this chamber is divided along the lines of party politics, but on days like this we are united as living and breathing and feeling human beings, and I think this chamber is at its best at those moments. My constituent, Lynn, was forcibly adopted shortly after the Second World War. And in order to understand her health concerns, she was eager to understand something of her family medical past. And she was denied access to medical records for many decades. And in fact, it was only a very helpful social worker who sought to try and reconstruct her family's medical past for her and with her. Given what the Prime Minister has said about the new national online resource today, could the Prime Minister say a little bit more about whether that will include details such as family medical history, so that constituents like Lynn might understand a little bit better their own health concerns? And also, given the highly time-sensitive nature of this, given that children were often born in the late 1940s and 1950s, can he say a little bit more about the timescales he expects to deliver this new resource?
Well, can I thank him and all? I think the unity across the House and the courage of a number of members in speaking out has been incredibly powerful. I think this aspect of how this House works is not well known enough. And we all have a duty to show this House when it's behaving well, not just this House when it's behaving not so well. And in relation to this business of being denied access to records, this again goes really deep. These are the records of the individuals who are trying to access them, about their lives and their identities, and yet barriers are being put in their place to access their own material. And this has to stop. And so we need to do everything we can to make sure those medical histories are available. And he's absolutely right. We need to move at speed here, because we're talking about events now, in some cases, of many, many years ago. So we need to move at speed, but we need to just remove the barriers. This is information, personal information, private information about people, about their background, their identity. They are entitled to it, and nobody should be putting barriers in the way of that. And I know they have done.
Orinda Just.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm really grateful to the Prime Minister for his heartfelt statement and apology. As a man of faith, I struggle to see what possible religious justification there could have been to have babies taken away from young mothers just because they were not married. And I have to feel a sense of shame as well that religion could be used in such a way. But I would like to join the Prime Minister in paying tribute to all the mothers, the campaigners, members of trade unions as well, including members of my own trade union, the GMB, for the decades of campaigning that they carried out to achieve this apology, and one would have hoped that the apology could have come sooner. But can I please end by asking the Prime Minister, does he agree with me that it is never too late to issue an apology for a wrongdoing?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
It is never too late to issue an apology for wrongdoing. I wholeheartedly agree with that, and pay tribute to all those that have campaigned, including trade unions and the GMB. He's absolutely right about what went wrong here, because the question that should have been asked was, what support can we give you to be able to bring up your baby? Not the questions that were asked. And if that question had been asked, we wouldn't be standing here today in the way that we are.
Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also welcome and thank the Prime Minister for his statement today. I was actually a member of the Scottish Parliament when it issued its own apology, and I know how important it was to those families. Can I ask the Prime Minister how the government will work with devolved governments to provide ongoing support, access to records and potential redress schemes to those affected?
Well, I thank you, Ben, for reminding us how important it was in Scotland as well. We have to work with the devolved nations on this. It is important that we do so constructively, positively and at speed, because everybody affected needs to know that we are all pulling together on this, and that where information and support is needed, it will be provided as quickly as possible.
James Nash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome today's heartfelt and important apology. The Prime Minister may recall that 16 years ago, Gordon Brown publicly apologised to Britain's child migrants 130,000 young children sent overseas, often without their parents' consent, to Commonwealth countries around the world. Margaret Humphreys and the Child Migrants Trust, which is based in my Rushcliffe constituency, continue to support survivors and campaign for recognition and redress. Following today's apology, alongside the very important commitments that the Prime Minister has made, would he also consider what more can be done to support the child migrants and to honour the national apology that was made back in 2010?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for his question. The 2010 apology was a solemn moment, and work continues to honour the legacy of that apology, just as the work will continue to honour and follow through on the apology that has been issued today.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was barbaric that 185,000 babies were taken from young mothers across a quarter of a century until just 50 years ago. And the Prime Minister is right to say how wrong that was. And in apologising on behalf of the state, he acknowledged that of the children who were taken, some were raised in loving homes by adoptive families. Does the Prime Minister accept that it is possible to say sorry to birth parents and their children while simultaneously being grateful to parents who did their very best to adopt children over that period, many of whom didn't know about the circumstances in which those babies were removed from their birth parents?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him, and I don't want to go against the spirit of his question, but I do have to say this. I think too many of those that were adopted were told that they should be grateful for what happened to them. And too many of the mothers were told that they should be grateful that their children would get care they couldn't provide. That in itself was deeply hurtful. Deeply, deeply hurtful. I'm not trying to suggest that others didn't try to do their level best, but this was not a situation in which anybody affected this should feel or be told that they should be grateful for what happened. And I'm not really not disrespecting his question. It's just, having had some of the discussions I had this morning, I know that this is felt very, very deeply, and I must say that therefore from this dispatch box, and I do, but otherwise I thank you for his question.
Alex Barras-Curtis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the Prime Minister and join him wholeheartedly in the statement and with the victims, those here and those who are not with us. As he said, it's another example of the perpetuation of abuse, not just in the initial abuse, but then in the cover-up, the secondary abuse that follows, the denial, the frustration for victims, their families and friends to get the truth. So I wonder what more you can say about that and the culture change that can be embedded, not just across the state, but at every institution that this applies to, so that this stops happening, but also that there is accountability where that does once again happen. And if I can just quickly join with my honourable friend with what he said about the Child Migrants Trust and urge the Education Secretary to perhaps look at the work that they've done, because I had worked with them before working in this place, on testimonials, because I think some of the experience there will be very invaluable for victims, for their stories, if they want them to be told and recorded, for them to be so done.
Well, I thank you for raising that, and I do think it's really important that we learn those lessons and draw where we can on the examples of other apologies and the legacy that has gone through. He's absolutely right to highlight the fact that there's not just the initial injustice, there's then all of the further injustices at almost every twist and turn, where those adopted have tried to find their parents being told it wouldn't be good for your mother if you tried to find her, or you can't have access to your own records, which will help you with your own identity and sense of worth. All of these injustices build on the initial injustice, and they're not also historic either. Some of them are much more contemporary. And if we're really going to deal with this, we have to deal with this recognising that with our eyes wide open.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also thank the Prime Minister very much for his statement, for his very careful and soft-spoken words, and also for the apology. And an apology, while vital for healing, is only a first step. It must be followed by tangible, compassionate action. We owe them nothing less than the total truth and structural redress, as well as our compassion for a lifetime of sometimes feeling unloved and unwanted, when this could not be further from the truth. We cannot give their years or the relationship back, but we can be honest and step up. So can I ask the Prime Minister what concrete steps are being taken to guarantee streamlined free access to original birth records? What cooperation is happening with the devolved administrations in the Northern Ireland Assembly to ensure that the survivors across the entirety of the United Kingdom can and will receive the same standard of tracing services and therapeutic support? Thanks so much.
Well, can I thank him? And he's absolutely right. There has to be tangible action coming out of this, and that has to be streamlined as he's described. We need to work with the devolved administrations. What we cannot do now is add a further injustice to all the injustices we've been describing during the course of this session by anything that makes it harder from here on in for people to get the support and the information that they need. And so we need to action what we're saying today, and we will do so.
Baran Moon.
Whereas, Madam Deputy Speaker, Rosemundy Mother and Baby Home, a Church of England affiliated institution in St Agnes in my Camborne, Redruth and Hale constituency, was a key institution in this scandal. The shame and pain has lived with these families for decades, and many have since taken this pain to their graves. As the Member of Parliament for St Agnes, I warmly welcome and echo the Prime Minister's national apologies and the lessons learned, so that we can at least try to relieve a tiny fraction of that pain. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that we simply would not be here today without the tireless and extraordinary efforts of the campaigners?
Prime Minister.
Let me wholeheartedly agree with him and thank him for highlighting the particular issue in his constituency. There will be other examples in all constituencies, I suspect, and thank him for highlighting that. But we would not be here without the hard work of the campaigners. Let's be blunt and let's be honest about that. And their work was not heard quickly enough, in my view. I'm glad that we've got to this day. It's an important day for them, but it's also an important day for us, because we need to recognise that this is about the state. This is about how the state responds, how the state acts, and so it's an important point for all of us as well.
Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for coming here with his heartfelt apology. And can I thank all of the campaigners for being here today and for the evidence they gave on the Education Select Committee. I was incredibly proud to be on the Education Select Committee when we reopened this inquiry, and I also want to pay tribute to my humble friend, the Chair of the Select Committee, for the work that she's personally done on this, and also the Minister and the Secretary of State. And we heard some really compelling evidence, not just from the parents, from the mothers who had their babies so cruelly ripped away from them, as described by many members across the House, but also from those who were themselves adopted. And I can see Sally in the gallery there, who spoke about a feeling of not belonging. So would the Prime Minister agree with me that when we look at supporting those people who are victims of this terrible injustice, it's not just about supporting those mothers, but also supporting those babies who were adopted, who are now obviously adults?
Well, I'm grateful to him, and I know the testimony was really powerful, and let me thank again the Select Committee for their work. But he's absolutely right that we have to see everybody affected here, and of course that is the mothers, of course that's the adults who were adopted. It goes beyond that, the extended families, the other members of extended families, siblings, and of course those who sadly passed before we got to today. But he's absolutely right. If we're going to hear and if we're going to see, we've got to hear and see everyone impacted by this, not just some.
Anthony Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Prime Minister for this long-awaited and long-overdue heartfelt apology on behalf of the state. As a mother to an 18-year-old daughter, each day that takes me further away from the day I gave birth to her, the more fiercely I hold on to the precious memory of her entering this world. So I cannot begin to imagine the pain inflicted on those mothers who had their babies ripped away from them. And I imagine they also have clear memories that never fade, but instead become even sharper as time goes by. I'm in awe of their strength. I am so sorry they experienced such pain. And I thank the Prime Minister for making it clear the shame sits with churches, charities, the healthcare system and the state, not with the survivors. I hope today goes some way in helping families torn apart to heal as best as they can.
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for her question, and she's absolutely right that this is pain that is felt and carried every single day by those affected every single day, and we recognise that. And I also recognise that today doesn't change that. Let's not pretend that it's all taken away by this apology. It's not. It lightens a little the load. It provides a degree of justice and acknowledgement from the state. But I'm in no doubt at all that that pain will continue, unfortunately, to have to be carried by those affected. We will simply do all we can to support them throughout that. But nothing can lift this. Nothing ever will lift this. But let's do everything we can to build on the apology given today.
Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the Prime Minister for his sincere apology for those who have experienced this historical forced adoption scandal, and pay tribute to those in the gallery today and those that cannot be here. I think he has talked a lot today, actually, about those that need to be heard and that may not have been heard. And so my question really is about to potentially my constituents and others in this House who may not have had the courage to come forward, or for those who are not sure whether or not they may have been affected or adopted. How can we give them some courage to come forward and know that they will be listened and that they will be heard and that they can access some of the support services that you have announced? Thank you.
Prime Minister.
I hope the apology goes to help those who haven't felt able to talk about this to come forward. On one level, it's a matter of courage, but it's probably more than that. I was struck this morning by the example given to me of trying to read a story in a newspaper about these issues and covering it up and not wanting to be seen in public reading the story because of that deep sense of shame. And I've no doubt that some who haven't been able to speak about this have felt they can't because they can't break out of that. I hope today helps them. I hope that by making it clear the shame is with us, it's our shame, and by hearing of the courage of those in the gallery and others who've campaigned, that it may just give them the ability to come forward. And it is important, I think, because if they do, they will find support. And by talking to others who've been affected in the same way, they may find some comfort they probably haven't got at the moment. But it is very difficult for people who have shut these things away to have the ability to come forward. It will take time, but hopefully it's one step closer today.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In moments like this, I feel the sheer privilege of getting to serve on both the Human Rights Committee and the Education Select Committee. But the Prime Minister is right that it should not have taken two Select Committee reports to get us here today. More importantly, it should not have taken the victim survivors of this terrible scandal having to retell their stories, re-traumatise themselves again and again to get here. As the Human Rights Committee report makes clear, there are some things only a government can do. And for that reason, I want to thank the Prime Minister from the bottom of my heart for his apology on the behalf of the state today. And just ask him, if he may, to set out in a little more detail how he and the Department for Education have worked with the survivors of this scandal to get to where we are today, and the full apology that he has set out. Thank you.
Well, can I thank him and the work he's done on both committees, and the work to get us here today has been done in conjunction with all those impacted, and we will continue to work in that way. That's the right way to work, and it's the only way to work, and so we'll continue down that vein. There are many challenges still ahead, but if we approach them by hearing and seeing and working with those affected, we have a better chance of meeting those challenges.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Prime Minister for what he said today and the way he said it, and of course the bravery of all the people who have been involved in getting us here. I have a constituent who's an adoptee. She came to see me recently. She was born in 1969, so she's 3 years older than I am. She told me that adoptees are 4 times more likely to try to commit suicide. So I really welcome the support for adult adoptees and mothers in the form of a health pathway for those affected by forced adoption.
including the counselling they will need because of their post-traumatic stress disorder. She also asked me to bring up the possibility of marking medical records for adult adoptees so they can get the screening and support they need for those who don't have a medical history to fall back on.
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Can I thank you for raising those issues, which are really important, and we will work with others to try to make improvements here and put the appropriate support and screening and information in place.
And that concludes the statement. Point of order, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise on a point of order of which I've given prior notice to the member for Lincoln, the Parliamentary Under Secretary at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Yesterday, I asked him about Britain's relationship with Israel in relation to its disgraceful expansion of illegal settlements. I made the point that these are illegal and supported and facilitated by the Israeli government. He did not answer my question about Britain's military cooperation. Instead, he misrepresented my words and implied I was somehow or other making a statement about the views of the Jewish people in this country, which I was absolutely not. I would like your advice on how I can ensure that the Minister comes back to the House, corrects the record and answers the question that I asked him.
I thank the Right Honourable Member for his point of order. He will know that ministers themselves are responsible for their words at the dispatch box. The Treasury front bench will have heard his concerns and I'm sure that they'll pass it on to the Minister. The Right Honourable Gentleman is an experienced member and will know that there are a number of routes available to him to further pursue questions to the Government on this issue. The clerks in the table office can advise him further if needed.
Point of order, Deputy Speaker.
Point of order, Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I can confirm I've given the required notices. Yesterday in Westminster Hall, the Maritime Minister, the Honourable Member for Selby, may have inadvertently misled the House in that he stated on 3 occasions that a Court of Appeal judgment changed the legal status of maritime Coast Guard rescue officers. It's simply not true. The Court of Appeal confirmed worker status that already existed and has existed for years. Indeed, it is the Maritime Coast Guard Agency, backed by the government, that is now seeking to change the status of those brave heroes to that of unpaid volunteers. Madam Deputy Speaker, can you advise me on how I seek to get the record corrected?
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for notice of his point of order. The Treasury benches will have heard his point and will doubtless communicate it to the Minister who is in his place, who will be able to consider whether there is anything in his remarks which requires correction or whether, taken as a whole, they gave an accurate account of the situation. Point of order, Florence Eshelome.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just want to seek guidance from your good self in terms of how I can remind members. I am proud to serve the constituency of Vauxhall and Campbell Green with many wonderful venues, hosting many fantastic events, but members, in terms of notification, including senior members, when they have speaking events, which are not private events, they should be notifying the said member.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving notice of her point of order. When a member visits another member's constituency, except on purely a private visit, they should take reasonable steps in advance to tell the member in whose constituency the visit is taking place. The document called The Rules of Behaviour and Courtesies in the House of Commons deals with this matter. Failing to follow that guidance is regarded as very discourteous. We now move to the presentation of bill. Presentation of bill, Matt Tremaine.
Controlled Drugs Procedure for Specification Bill.
Second reading, what day?
Friday, September the 11th, 2026.
Friday, September the 11th, 2026. We now come to motion number 1 relating to the appointment of the Chair of the National Audit Office. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that a humble address be presented to His Majesty, praying that His Majesty will appoint Michael Jerry, CBE, to the office of Chair of the National Audit Office from the 10th of January 2027. The Chair of the National Audit Office plays an incredibly important role in our democracy. It supports Parliament's scrutiny of government expenditure and safeguards the independence of the National Audit Office. At a time of continued pressure on public finances and household budgets, delivering value for money across government is absolutely vital. It is therefore right that this appointment is made on the basis of merit and commands the confidence across this House. Michael Jerry brings extensive experience of leadership, governance and public service. As a government